this red button. Oh, here. What is that? Let's see if I can. I'm internet sensation and teen heartthrob Jared Spool. Putting on an event like this is a ton of work, and Kelly and Marjorie and the whole team here has been working for months on this thing. Let's give them a big round of applause. I'm very excited to be here. Okay, I'd like to start our journey today by taking us to China, to actually a city you've probably never heard of in China called Kunming. And Kunming is famous for a variety of things. It is famous for its sort of very metropolitan feel. It feels sort of like Chicago, but it's like the size of LA. It's huge. But it's also famous for its history, including this monastery built on top of this giant stone forest. These things are 100 or so meters tall. It's just incredible what it is. But one of the things it's also become famous for is for its Apple Store. And these are not your normal Apple Store. These are completely fake imitation Apple Store, right? In this Apple Store, it looks and feels like an Apple Store. It has the desks and the tables and the posters, and even the way they display the products and the T-shirts and the badges that the employees wear seem like a real Apple Store, but it is completely fake. And not only is there this one store, there are actually 41 imitation Apple stores in Kunming, China. Right? And every single one of them is identical to a real Apple Store. Sort of. And these aren't the only Apple stores that are imitation. They're not just in Kunming. They're all over the world. In fact, in the United States, we've identified actually 72 imitation Apple stores. And like the ones in Kunming, they have the tables and the chairs and the wall posters and even the T-shirts and the badges, except these are run by Microsoft. And it wasn't just Microsoft that decided to get into the Apple Store business. At one point, Barnes & Noble's, with its off-again, on-again Nook e-reader, decided that it needed to have an Apple Store look and feel alongside its book stuff to promote the e-reader. And JCPenney, at one point, so wanted to be like an Apple Store that they actually went out and they hired this, for their CEO, the guy who designed the original stores for Apple, to have him come and be their CEO so they could feel like an Apple Store. And it has hit every industry completely.
What's your latest operating system? So this is almost me. This is what the excitement's about.
16-bit, 32-bit.
It's 2-bit. Is it wireless? Oh yeah, complete wireless.
Single core, dual core.
Full of great content, easy to use, good with the mouse and interface.
Docking system.
That's docked. That's docked, yeah. And you downloaded?
I downloaded.
One click. Boom, you're connected. Oh, sir.
It's amazing.
Really good. And works perfectly in direct sunlight.
Somersby cider. Less apps, more apples.
So, why does everyone want to be like an Apple Store? Well, if you just look at the numbers, it starts to tell us a story as to why this might be. For example, last year, the Apple stores had as much foot traffic in them as all of the Disney theme parks combined. And when we look year over year at their annual revenue, we start to see all sorts of things. So, for example, the average retail space tends to go for $341 per square foot. That's how you measure the success of a retail space, is how much money per square foot does it make. Tiffany's comes in at about $2,000 or $3,000 a square foot, right? So that's substantially higher than the average. So where does Apple fit relative to Tiffany's in the average store? Well, they tend to come in about twice at what Tiffany's comes in, at $6,000 a square foot. So, of course, anybody who's in retail would want to have an Apple store. You'd be crazy to not want to have that success and want to do it. But if you look closely at what the Apple store is about, what you quickly see is that every part of that store has been thought through. It's very, the way they display their products, the products they use to display their products. They don't have any cashiers. Instead, every employee walks around with a device that can ring you up from your credit card directly, so there's never any standing in line waiting for a cashier type deal. And if you don't want to pay with a credit card, that's okay. They've actually rejiggered all the furniture, so it has this magical drawer that just appears to be able to make change when it's time to do this. And every little aspect of buying something from the Apple store is intentional. It's thoughtful. And it doesn't mimic things that are done just because that's the way we've always done them. They came in and said, well, what can we do? How can we make an experience? And all of this is what we would call design. Now, design is a word that people argue over in terms of what it means, but I found a definition that works really well. Design is the rendering of intent. A designer has an intention in the world. They have something they want to change, and they have decided that they're going to render that intention by doing the work of design. If we want to see how this plays out, we can look back at what has become the largest lawsuit that has ever been settled between two companies. And that was the Apple-Samsung suit from 2012. And what was interesting about that suit was two pieces of evidence that came about. The suit was settled in Apple's favor for $1 billion. And the jury afterwards said that there were two pieces of evidence that basically sold them that Samsung had illegally copied Apple's products. The first was this chart that the lawyers made. And in the chart, the lawyers show what the Samsung phones look like leading up to the 2007 introduction of the iPhone. And then they show what the iPhone looks like and how it's very different from the phones that Samsung had created up until that point. And then they showed how Samsung's phone, for a little while, were very different from the iPhone, and then suddenly started to look like the iPhone. And so the jury said, yeah, this basically convinced us that Samsung deliberately was trying to be like the iPhone. But what really swung them, what really changed their behavior, was actually a weird piece of evidence. It was a 132-page report created by Samsung's QA department, in which the QA department basically went through feature by feature of one of the Samsung phones and compared those features to the iPhone, in every instance saying, the Samsung phone is broken, make it work like the iPhone. 132 pages of that. And the jury said, this is clear. They wanted to be just like the iPhone. They copied the iPhone. That was illegal under trademark and copyright laws, and they therefore deserve $1 billion. And that was it. Now imagine being the QA person who wrote that report and learning that the jury used your report to make its decision. Right? What must that be like for that QA person, right? On the one hand, you just cost your company $1 billion. On the other hand, someone actually read your report. A lot of mixed feelings here. That's never happened before. Design is the rendering of intent. And this word intention is interesting because we can sort of break it down on a scale. We can say on one side of the scale, our intention is to do what other people have done well. We don't want to be new at this. Let's use the benefits of other people's work and actually just do what they've done because it works well. Why should we be different? And on the other side, we have this notion of creating something new, of actually doing something that is different than everybody else. We can place our intention anywhere we want on this scale. But when we study organizations, we can see that the imitation route is something that people often go towards. For example, Yahoo spent at one point a good year with a big team redesigning what a news homepage could look like, doing so in a way that no one had ever done before. 6 months later, AOL announces their new homepage, and it looks just like the Yahoo page. AOL could have invested a year, but just copying the basic form of Yahoo made sense. It was a better design. Why not go down that route? And so when we think of this tension between imitation and innovation, we start to look and say, okay, well, how does this break down for organizations? Well, for one thing, the imitation thing is definitely cheaper. And it doesn't have as much risk. After all, we've proven in the marketplace that the idea is already good. We don't have to do that. Whereas innovating, that's incredibly expensive, and there's a lot of risk associated with it. We don't know if our idea will pan out. But the other thing that's really interesting when we look at organizations is that in the places where they tend to imitate more than they innovate, they don't value design as much. They hire designers to come in sort of at the end of the process and to be part of it, not as a full-fledged contributor, but just as, sort of slapping the pretty on. And they see it really as a commodity. It doesn't matter which designers you get, just get a designer in here and make it happen. So, let's not do anybody expensive, let's get somebody cheap. Whereas the folks who are more on the innovation side, they see design as strategic. They see design as part of that innovation thing. So they actually value it more, and as a result, they see it as their competitive edge. And that difference is really important. What this means is that our business, the business that we're in, and whether we're in a commercial business or we're helping the chemistry department do what it needs to do and get its information out into the world, or working for government, we're still looking at this basic idea that we need to make sure that we are appropriately innovative. We need to make sure that we are copying when that's appropriate, but also innovating when that's appropriate. And what we're finding is that innovation is actually where we need to do the most investment. Businesses win at that point, which means suddenly designers are now being valued more. And that's good news for those of us who've been working in UX, user experience design, for a while now. But we can sort of take this apart a little bit more. The newspaper industry was sailing along just fine, and suddenly it started to collapse. And one of the triggers of that collapse was a website, Craigslist. Craigslist comes out and hits the local newspaper part of the newspaper industry where it really hurts, right in the classified ads. Classified ads were never really designed well from the usage experience. You could only submit them on Thursdays. They would show up on Saturday. You know, there was all this sort of crazy around them. They cost money. There was limited space. Craigslist changed all that. Suddenly, the newspaper business wasn't going to make any money from classified ads. That was a big chunk of revenue that just disappeared out from under them. And the thing about Craigslist is, from a design perspective, if you're a trained designer, your first reactions are, wow, this is fugly, right? This is not a well-designed website. But if you actually watch people use Craigslist, you find out that, in fact, it's actually a very well-designed website, and that it really does what it needs to do. For the people who use it, it is an extremely effective tool. And it gets you in, it gets you out, it doesn't have much clutter, it's very clear what to do most of the time. It works very well. But even Craigslist isn't immune, and they started to see things chipping away at their empire. One of the places that's most obvious is around vacation rentals. And it wasn't long before a site that is better designed, more effective, came about. One that could work on multiple platforms, work on mobile. And suddenly, Airbnb is now the place to go instead of using Craigslist for the vacation rental business. And this sort of constant replacement of the new leader is this notion of disruption. And disruption is basically about a sudden change in the market that nobody expects. And organizations are struggling to predict if they might be disrupted. And we see it in all of them, right? Financial markets, financial services right now are really struggling. So, for example, company comes out and completely disrupts the credit card industry by producing a 5-cent gadget that you can plug into the headphone jack of your phone, and now anybody with a phone can swipe a credit card. So the local street vendor or market, the person who walks your dogs, babysitter, person you get your drugs from, all these people can take your credit card now, and it works just fine. So all of that disrupts everything. And of course, the rest of the financial industry panics, and they don't know what to do. PayPal, for example, immediately rushed its own swiping product to market, but they innovated. Theirs was a triangle. And so this phenomena keeps going, right? In the rental car industry, an industry that was thought to be completely solid, it was just a cash money machine, its shareholders had nothing to worry about, suddenly finds itself in trouble when a company out of Cambridge called Zipcar comes along. Oop, I think a server just crashed. Zipcar comes along, and Zipcar is this capability to rent a car that's in walking distance and never deal with a rental car agent because you've signed up online and you have this thing that unlocks the local car. And for people who live in a place, usually a city, where having a car is a huge expense, They don't have to pay insurance. They don't have to pay for parking. They don't even have to pay for gas. That's all included. And you just go and you rent the car when you need to go to the dentist or when you need to go to Home Depot or whatever it is. Zipcar turns out to be a perfect solution for that. And of course, this panics the entire rental car industry. Hertz has now made 5 attempts to come up with their own version of Zipcar, each one of which has completely failed, mostly because of the problems they have with union agreements where they can't cut humans out of the process like Zipcar has done. Avis, who tries harder, has given up. And instead, they just bought Zipcar. Yeah. So, and what's caused the problem here is that the people who rent from Zipcar are actually now completely scared that Avis will ruin the service, because that Avis will sort of turn it into more like Avis and less like Zipcar, and that innovation will go away. And that's really sort of the problem that we have here, is this notion that on this scale of imitation innovation, companies are trapped, right? Companies that are being disruptive aren't in a place to innovate. And they're now realizing that they have to build that capability because they can see the outcome. And the outcome is that the payoff is much bigger when you innovate. And again, happening in all industries. I mean, let's take the entertainment business. In fact, let's hone into a very niche piece of the entertainment business. Circus Entertainment, right? Circus Entertainment's been around for hundreds of years. It's an established business. Everybody sort of knows how it works. One company basically sort of turned it on its head. And this company was actually started by a couple of street performers in Canada, Montreal, who just decided that, hey, people are willing to pay us a lot of money to do this on the street. We could reach a wider audience if we took it on the road. Let's figure out how to do that. So they did the incredible. They created a circus at a time when the circus industries, the circus businesses all over the world were seeing their revenues decline and their costs go up. They decided to go into this business, even though there was every piece of evidence that said this is a dying business. And they did so by making some really smart design decisions. One of the design decisions they made, everybody thought was insane. They basically decided to cut the animals out of the circus. Right? How can you have a circus without animals? For hundreds of years, that was the centerpiece. And everybody who knew about how circuses make money thought this was insane, because cute animals bring cute children, and cute children bring cute parents who have cute wallets. And so the circus business was hinged on this basic notion that what people came for more than anything else was the animals. But the problem with the animals is that they cost a ton of money. Transporting them, keeping them safe, dealing with veterinarians, dealing with feeding costs, dealing with protesters, all of these things were increasing and getting more and more expensive. And if they cut that out, those costs go away, which meant they could then take that money and invest it in better performers, better music, better costumes, better scenery, better staging. And suddenly, what circuses realized was that because there were no children, they could raise the ticket prices. And suddenly, instead of an average ticket price of $35 a seat, they were now getting upwards of $185 a seat. And suddenly, that caused them to be able to increase profits and deliver a better business because they were better designed. And tonight, Circus LA will make more money than all of Broadway's performances ticket sales combined. So everybody's paying attention to Cirque du Soleil. And the difference between Cirque du Soleil and all of its previous competitors was its design and the intentional design decisions that went into it. There's a sort of a founding member of the design community is a guy named Milton Glaser. And once when asked what he did, you've seen his work. He created the I Love New York logo. He created New York Magazine. He did the original artwork for the production of Hair. He did Bob Dylan's first record album. You have seen his work. And he once, when asked what he did, he said, well, I move things around until they look right. That's what a designer did. That was how they thought about things. But this is a very sort of visual notion of design, this idea of looking right. And design has changed. Design is no longer about the visual. It's about the business. It's about creating a business that makes sense. And we can see this, again, if we go back to how business models work, right? Let's take a tablet and how it gets sold, right? We can compare the sale of a tablet. We could see, for instance, that Best Buy, when they sell a tablet, they make 50% of the price, right? So if the tablet costs $100, they make $50 on this. Samsung, who made the tablet, well, they make $40 on it. And the remaining money actually goes to a distributor whose job it is to get that tablet from Samsung's manufacturing sites to Best Buy's stores. And this is basically how it works in every retail industry. There's a distributor, there's a manufacturer, there's a retail outlet. And they all take a piece of the price. Except for Apple. Because for Apple, they sort of own the whole thing. And so, for that $100, they make $100. They don't make $50 or $40. They make $100. That means they can invest more in the parts, they can invest more in the quality, they can invest more in the sales, and still make a profit. And actually, this is a little bit of a lie, because Best Buy discounts, and Apple does not. So Apple actually makes more than the $100 that Best Buy makes on the same tablet. Okay? That's pretty incredible. Business models are intentionally designed. That was not an accident. That was intentional. And because it's intentional, it means that business needs designers who know how to design business models. That's part of that innovation, is understanding how that works. So design is not visual. It is all aspects of the business. Now, it would be easy to see me as an Apple fanboy. And I do favor Apple products. I own them. I own many versions of them. I have all sorts of dead ones in my drawers, along with lots of other ones. But, they're not perfect. Right? I find myself going and needing service on a regular basis. Every so often, something happens. This is called an artisanal display. And Apple did something brilliant when they opened their Apple stores. They created the role of genius. I've always wanted to be a genius. I thought that as a child, it would have made my, as a young person entering the workforce, if I'd become a genius, it would have made my Thanksgiving dinners that much easier. So what do you do now? I'm a genius, Mom. And how much does that pay? Minimum wage. The Genius Bar is amazing, right? And one of the things that makes it amazing is how they deal with the experience of that service, right? And we can draw that out on a customer journey map, right? So if you've never seen a customer journey map, basically what we do is we write out the steps that a person goes through on their journey to do something, in this case, to get a defective product that they purchased repaired. We put that on a timeline, and we put it on a scale from extreme frustration to extreme delight. And we sort of say, okay, what happens here? And we can say, well, getting the new product was cool, but when I tried it out and it was broken, well, that really was frustrating. But then I sort of went to the store and that was okay, but now I have to wait in line to get something fixed, and that's really annoying and just time-consuming. And then, let's say that whatever fix they gave me, I was delighted with. Right? So that would be a sort of typical store journey for getting something fixed. And we've all had this experience. And if we were to sit and actually study, we could see, okay, that waiting for service part, that's something that we could definitely improve. And we could go out and actually see what happens when people have to wait, and it's a painful, awful process. And then we could say, okay, what could we do better? And nobody did this. For decades of retail, nobody bothered to look at that experience. Until Apple came along. And Apple said, well, you know what we could do? Instead of making people wait, we could just let them schedule a time. We could create an appointment. They could come in for their appointment, and when they're here for the appointment, they don't have to stand in line. We can just let them shop. So now we've got people who bought a defective product shopping in our store for another one. Brilliant, right? And this is what we might call innovation. Now, innovation is a word that people use all the time. And I don't think that word means what they think it means. Because people tend to think that innovation is about inventing something. That in order to be innovative, you have to invent something that nobody has done before. But Apple was innovative, and they did not invent the appointment. That had been invented by dentists decades before. Right? They just took appointments, a known construct, and they put it in an environment where it added value to the experience. That's what innovation is. Innovation is about adding new value, not about inventing new things. And we can see on our journey map that changes things. When we add the make an appointment step, suddenly we get a different journey for the customer. There's more delight in the experience. And we were able to actually manipulate the experience that the user had. Through our design decisions, we could change what experience people had. And that's innovation. That's designing an experience. And the reality is that we can do this. We can map experiences, we can measure experiences, and therefore we can change the experiences that people have. We can design them. It all depends on our intention. Now, I've given this talk a few times, and every so often someone will come up to me and say, well, not everything needs to be well designed. Not everything's going to be delightful, right? Some things just need to be frustrating. Like, really? Like what? Well, no one's going to ever make taxes delightful. Okay. It's an app that sucks the text right off the page. What this is a product that Intuit had announced called TurboTax SnapTax. And what it does is you take a picture of your W-2 or your 1099s, and it turns out that if you are filing a 1040A or a 1040EZ, which 48% of Americans file, everything you need is actually on your W-2 or your 1040A. All the information is there, or on your W-2 or 1099. So all the information is there. So you just take a picture of it, and it uses optical character recognition to scan the page. It can then fill out a version of the form and even submit it for you electronically, allowing you to collect a refund if that's due to you, or telling you how much taxes you owe and letting you set up a payment plan with the IRS. And all this happens in under 15 minutes. And because that same 48% of Americans are also the ones who are often not as educated as the rest of Americans, have problems with simple math, they are less likely to make math errors, they're less likely to make mistakes, they're less likely to get audits, they're less likely to delay their refund, and all of this happens in 15 minutes. And for those people, filing their taxes with this thing is delightful. It completely removes the stress and burden of filing taxes. So yes, you can make doing your taxes more delightful. Okay, but not everything. All right, what about cancer? Cancer will never be delightful, right? Well, no, cancer by itself won't be delightful, but the treatment of cancer, we could do something there. This is a GE MRI machine. This particular model is in the University of Pittsburgh. It is used for specifically pediatric oncology. And imagine being a 6-year-old who's been diagnosed with a brain tumor, who now has to submit to a scan, which will take 7.5 minutes, for which they cannot move. Because if they move just a quarter of a centimeter, they will unfocus the image, and the imaging will have to start over another 7.5 minutes. So, you're a small child. Everybody in your life has been acting weird for weeks. You come into this room with this giant machine. It's 8 feet tall. It's in this completely sterile environment. It looks horrific. I mean, just look at this thing. There are Japanese anime films with devices like that eat plants. Right? And you're going to have to lie in this thing absolutely still for 7.5 minutes and not move. And what do the kids do? They freeze up, they start to cry, they seize onto their parents, they won't let go. They don't want to do this. They don't want to do this. So what do the doctors have to do? The technicians who run the machine, they have to sedate the kids. 80% of the kids who they have to scan need sedation. This is Doug Dees, and he designed that machine. And he was watching it be used at the University of Pittsburgh. And he was watching these episodes of having to sedate the kids because they were terrified and too freaked out. He says, we've got to be able to do something about this. And he put together a team to study this, to really understand it. And that team came up with this. This is the GE Adventure Series. It's the same machine underneath, but it's been completely redesigned to be an adventure. And if you are a child who needs a scan, your experience actually doesn't start in the room with this machine. And your experience starts in another room, probably where you've been for a while, where a technician comes in and hands you not a lab gown, but a pirate suit. And it doesn't seem that weird, because just before handing you the pirate suit, the technician has handed your parents pirate suits. And the technician has been wearing a pirate suit. So everybody's dressing up as a pirate today. And then we walk down the hall, and I don't know if you can see, but there's sort of like this plank area here, and you walk down the dock, and there's water, and the kids are like, "Mom, Dad, get out of the water, walk on the..." Everybody's having this adventure, and of course, the parents are oblivious to this, and the parents walk into the room, and the whole room has been redesigned for all the senses. There are lights that look like bubbles rising from the water, and there's artwork painted on the walls, and they even use aromatherapy. For this particular room, it smells like a pina colada. And the parents come in and they go, "Pina colada, I could use one of those." And everybody laughs, and the kid laughs, and this is all intentionally designed because Doug and his team knew that if he can get the parents laughing, the kids will then relax, and that will feel safer for them. So they do that, and then the technician says, "Do you want to ride on the pirate ship?" And the kid's like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Okay. Would you like to see the flying mermaids?" Like, "Sure." Okay. So here's the deal. The flying mermaids only come out if you're absolutely still. If you stay absolutely still, they will show up. Okay. So the kid gets up on the bed of the device. They put on special headsets. There's Caribbean music playing throughout the system. The technician and parents go into the room next door in the observation room. The kid can hear their parents the whole time, and they start the machine. They start the scan. Lights go down, and there are little LEDs on the device itself. And as the LEDs are spinning up, it starts to look like there are mermaids flying. And the kids stay absolutely still. And what they've been able to do is reduce the sedation rate from 80% down to 0.01%. That's how design works. That's intention. This is experience design. Experience design is thinking about the whole design process, the whole cycle, and making sure that we can design everything. Now, how do we get these experienced designers to do this? Well, this is a problem, and nobody knows this problem more than the folks in Silicon Valley, because they've been trying to do this for a while, and there just aren't enough designers. So much to the fact that when Facebook decided to purchase Instagram, they spent $1 billion on it. Now, the interesting thing about the purchase of Instagram, most people don't know, is at the time that Facebook chose Instagram to purchase, there were 36 other photo apps in the App Store, including one that had been built and delivered just 4 months before from Facebook. So Facebook wasn't buying Instagram because they didn't know how to make a photo app. They were buying Instagram because they wanted the employees, 13 of them, who were designers. They needed designers. And what we see in Silicon Valley is that there was this complete round where companies just started buying design firms. They were just like, okay, we're just going to buy companies that have designers because it's easier than trying to hire designers. And that process has continued. And now we're seeing companies all over investing in designers because they have to survive. And there are now, we estimate, more than 21,000 UX design positions open in the US market. And that's just growing every day. And for us designers, this is awesome because we've been trying to get the attention of business for a long time, and now business is buying this, and suddenly we're in this place of wow, we're getting what we asked for. Well, you should be careful what you ask for because you might actually get it. And that problem is that it's now really hard to hire designers. It has never been harder. So we started a project a few years ago to say, okay, if we're going to help companies hire design teams, what do they need to look for? What are the skills that they need to find? So we went out and we talked to people who had great teams and said, well, what skills do you value most? What are the things that are there? And we expected to get a handful of skills. And what they told us was, in fact, there are a bunch of skills that they need. For example, they need what we call information architecture. They need the skill of organizing information. So a lot of things we design today have large amounts of information. Information architecture helps us organize it, helps people navigate around it. Of course, the information itself needs to be well written, well crafted, easy to understand, so copy is key. We need to understand how we're going to manage the design process, because it turns out that design is an iterative process. You have to try things, see how they work, try more things, see how they work. So understanding how to design in that mode takes a different set of skills. And part of that is the seeing how they work part. Well, that's user research. So we need to know how to go out and conduct research to do these things. And in that, we also need to have great interactions. So we have to make sure that the way that the designs we're creating are interactive, makes sense. Oftentimes we have lots of information to display, so we need to make sure that if it's a schedule or a table of prices or something, that the display makes perfect sense, that people understand what's there. Maybe it's an interactive map, and of course there's a visual element to all of this. You can't forget that, so we have to make sure that it not just aesthetically pleasing, but that the most important information is what jumps off the screen first, and the lesser important information comes off the screen at the moment that the person needs it, they can see what's there. And then, of course, there's understanding what goes into the design, and more importantly, what does not go into the design to make sure that we don't make it too complex. So it turns out that all of these skills were skills that the hiring managers told us were necessary. And we thought, okay, that's good, but we were concerned that we didn't capture them all. We said, well, is there anything else? I said, actually, there is. And so they started to tell us about, well, we need to be able to not just have people come in and tell us whether they like the thing or not. We need to go out and understand the work, so it requires more sort of ethnographic skills, and we have to know something about the domain we're in. If we're in education, we have to understand how education works. If we're in medical science, we have to understand how medicine works. If we're in financial systems, we have to understand how finance works. So we have to understand the domain. We also need to understand the business. How do we keep the money coming in so that we can pay the bills, so that we can make sure that we can keep going sustainably? That's key to all this. And we've got all this information now coming in from our systems, all this telemetry. How do we start to interpret that and figure out what it's telling us and what it's not? And we have to be able to tell people what the value of what we do is and how that works. And of course, that we have to build it on technology that we can support, and there's a return on investment that we have to be able to manage. And if everything we do now is social, we have to be able to make sure that we can communicate socially from one thing to the next, and that we have to then communicate all that to our developers who are going to build this, so we have to explain to them the context of use and how that works, and we also have to understand the methods that developers use and all the things that go there. So there's all of these skills that we need to be able to put products out, put services out that make sense. And these are a lot of skills. And we thought, okay, we've got them all now. We've got all the skills. We can just organize these and get it there. And we kept doing our research to get a little bit more information, and we changed up some of the questions, and one of the questions we added in to the research as we were going was, well, what separates out the best designers? We were hoping to have a couple of these things prioritize themselves, right? They would tell us that a couple of these skills are really important and bubble up to the top, and then we would know, well, what makes a great designer versus just a good designer? But that's not what they told us. It turns out when we asked for that, we got completely new skills. They told us that, well, what separates the best designers is that they can tell stories about the users, about how the users use the system, about what they need in a way that gets everybody on board and everybody understands what we're doing. And the best designers know how to deliver a critique to a fellow peer so that they can make their design better, and more importantly, know how to receive critique from other peers so that they can make their designs better. And the best designers know how to take an idea and render it so that everybody immediately gets it, whether it's a sketch on a whiteboard or a blackboard or something much more sophisticated. They know how to do that. And the best designers know how to present their work and get everybody to understand how they got to this point and where they're going. And the best designers know how to take a group of people, particularly stakeholders, and get out of those folks what they need by facilitating a session that actually is collaborative and works together. And that these were the skills that separated the great designers from the rest. And that's a lot of skills. So the question became, well, how do we begin to find people who can do that? This is Dr. Stephen Margos, and he is a orthopedic surgeon at the Leahy Clinic in Burlington, Massachusetts, 10 miles to the northwest of Boston if you've never been there. And he is an absolute expert in hands and wrists. People come from all over the world to get treated by him. He's helped pianists rebuild their hands. There was a pianist who slipped on some ice, fell, caught her hand in the door of a car, broke it in 34 places, was told she would never play piano again, is currently touring with one of the world's best symphony orchestras as their prime pianist. He rebuilt her hand. A tennis pro who has the common but painful and often career-ending tennis elbow or repetitive strain injuries, he was able to put them on a treatment plan that and give them some corrective surgery that would allow them to return to the tennis circuit and actually go on to win some international opens. This is what he does. And interestingly enough, people come from all over the world. He's world-renowned for his skills, and yet it's possible you could get an appointment with him. You just call him up. The appointment will probably be 6 months from now, and that's only because currently he is up to his elbows in hands and wrists. Some of these jokes are just for me. And he works with 34 other orthopedic surgeons at the Leahy Clinic, all of whom specialize in some part of the human skeletal system, something specific like that. And they are all world-renowned experts, just like he is. But if you travel 10 miles due west to Concord, Massachusetts, you end up in Emerson Hospital. And in Emerson Hospital, they have 9 orthopedic surgeons, none of whom specialize in any part of the skeletal system. They are just really good orthopedic surgeons. And if you went to see them, chances are whatever you had, they would do a fine job of getting you back up and operative the way you want. And if you travel 175 miles northeast to Rumford, Maine, you will find yourself at the Rumford Hospital, where the orthopedic specialist there shows up 2 days a week. And if you happen to get there on a day that is not one of those 2 days, the doctor who will treat you is a doctor who yesterday was delivering a baby and tomorrow will clear out an impacted bowel. If you think about it, those two things are somewhat similar. On second thought, don't think about it. And The thing about it is that it's not that Rumford Hospital hates the idea of orthopedic surgeons. They don't, it's not that they don't think that they're valuable. It's that they can't afford it. They are not like the Leahy Clinic. They are not attracting a clientele from all over the world. They get a local clientele who doesn't have a lot of money, and as a result, they can't afford expensive specialists. One of the things about Dr. Margles that I want to point out is that in order for Dr. Margles to become an orthopedic surgeon, he had to first become a doctor. This is true of anybody who specializes in medicine. The first thing you do is become a generalist. You become a doctor. And he had to learn how to suture a wound and how to deliver a baby and how to clear an impacted bowel. He had to do all of that stuff because that's what all doctors have to learn. That's part of medicine. And then he could choose his specialty, and then he could become a world-renowned expert. And in order to keep his license, he still has to take courses on how to suture a wound and how to deliver a baby, because that's what we expect doctors to do. If he's the only doctor on the island when the baby is coming, he's the person you want to be there to deliver the baby, even though that's not his specialty. And that's the thing. A specialist is someone who is completely expert in one area, whereas a generalist is someone who, in fact, just has even expertise in all areas. And that can be a lot of expertise. But in the tech industry, we've created somebody else. We call them a compartmentalist because we don't have a better name. And those are people who can only do one thing. And once there's something else, they just have to throw up their hands and say, I can't do that. They're not helpful. And those compartmentalists are actually hurting their own careers. And that's part of the problem. That's a key issue that we have. But anyone can become a generalist in user experience. And the way that we do that is you have to start by learning all the skills. But you can learn all the skills in this notion of being an experience designer. You can learn these because all of us who do this have learned these. The thing is that we think of people who've learned all these skills. The name that's come out in the market is unicorn, right? Everybody says, okay, these people are unicorns. And so the question that we've had for the last few years is, how do we make unicorns? My friend Adam Connor, who lives not too far from here, had an idea as to how you make a unicorn. It involves a horse and a narwhal. And some loving. But we came up with our own idea, and it's basically anyone can learn to become a UX design unicorn in basically 5 easy steps. And the first is this. You go out and you find some aspect, one of those things on that chart. You know, maybe it's visual design, maybe it's interaction design, maybe it's user research, doesn't matter what it is. You go find one of those things, and right now, it is so easy to train yourself. There are so many resources out there that you can use. Many of them are free, some of them are very inexpensive. You can go and learn all the things. But the most important thing is you have to practice. You have to take those skills and you have to actually start applying them. Again, not hard to do in user experience stuff. You just take your work and say, well, how would I make the experience better here? How would I make it more delightful? And then you start looking at what other designers are doing. And you say, okay, how did they solve this problem? How did they make it more delightful? And you work from there. And you seek out feedback from other people. You actually see who's doing interesting work, saying, hey, can I show you my stuff? Can I get some feedback from you? And more importantly, you listen to the feedback, which is probably one of the hardest things here. And then finally, you find someone else who's trying to become a unicorn, and you take what you've learned and you teach it to them. Because we actually learn things when we teach it to others. Everyone who's speaking at this event, has learned a ton in the process of putting together their presentation for this event. So you find a way to teach other people. And that's it. Those are the 5 steps. And it turns out that those 5 steps, well, that's the most important innovation that design has brought us. And that's what I came to talk to you about. So, to summarize real quick, design is the rendering of intent. It's we can imitate, we can innovate. When we innovate, it's really about adding new value to what we're doing. Experience design is about designing in the gaps. So we want to think in terms of what the whole experience is, not just the digital component, but what the whole experience is, no matter what we're working on. The teams need generalists more than they need specialists. So the more skills you can bring to the table, the better off you are. And that anyone can become a unicorn. We know this. We've created a school for them in Chattanooga where we take people who are career shifters, who've never done design before, and make them into generalists. And our first cohort just graduated in October. They have been doing amazing. All of them got jobs immediately and are loving their work and bringing value to their teams. So all of this can happen. It can happen to you too. And that's what I came to talk to you about. If for some reason you found this to be the least bit interesting, we write a lot of stuff on UIE.com, so there's a tremendous amount of things there on design and design strategy. Also, we have a library at UIE.com called All You Can Learn, which is filled with hundreds of videos and seminars on every aspect of design, all the things on that chart. So if you want, you can subscribe to that. If you work in design and we're not connected on LinkedIn, please, by all means, connect to me on LinkedIn. I'm the only Jared Spool in LinkedIn as far as I know. And happy for the invitation. We'll accept it. It's a great way, I found, for me to get to connect with other designers. And finally, you can follow me on the Twitters where I tweet about design, design experience, design strategy, design education, and the amazing customer service habits of the airline industry. Thank you very much for attending. Enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you for encouraging my behavior.